Chapter 216 Troublesome Children. That means you are here to marry my son? Maximus concluded. His son is really not a good thing, charming even a goddess from far away. That's right. According to High Goddess Ruliana, this is the only way to go, Elysian sighed. She didn't want to marry all of a sudden either. Unfortunately, to avoid being assimilated by her god's authority, she needs to take this step. It's really troublesome, Maximus frowned. Amara was just about to awaken her memory, and with another variable added, the chance of Liam coaxing his wife would plummet. Just now feeling the curse of love, Maximus estimated that there is only a few months' time for Elysian. If this is not suppressed, Elysian would become a puppet. Such a good daughter-in-law, Maximus didn't want to just give it up. Thinking of a solution, he scanned her with the system. Elysian, the goddess of love. God's authority, love 0.00012%. Curse of love, 20.12%. Curse of zealous witch, 30.1%. Gods have no inherent talent, it mainly depends on how much control they have to their god's authority. However, if measured by normal standards, gods have a rank 9 talent. Furthermore, their strength is also tier 9. Of course, all of this is fake and only on paper. Without great mastery of one's god's authority, they are barely stronger than normal tier 8. After reading the description of the curse of love and the curse of the zealous witch, he thought of a solution. Looking at the frowning Elysian, he said, I can't have you marry my son for now, I'm afraid. This brought Elysian's face gloomier. Why? Elysian asked as dark thoughts began to emerge within her. Relax. Although I can't have you marry Liam, I can suppress your curse for now, Maximus comforted. Really? Elysian looked at him excitedly. But after thinking that even a high god can't do anything to her curse, Elysian didn't have much hope. You don't seem to believe it? Maximus smiled. Elysian just stayed silent, waiting for an answer. Ha ha ha, alright, this is what I'm talking about. Maximus took out a necklace. While talking to Elysian, he ordered his system to sift through all the items for sale that can suppress the curse of love. Fortunately, he was not disappointed. His system quickly found a tier 9 treasure, the necklace of unrequited love. It acts as a reserve dam, to reserve the overflowing love you have for a person, then slowly release it. Such an item cost him about 30 quadrillion, sending his wallet nearly empty. This? Elysian was shocked, feeling the aura released by the necklace. Just by being near it, she felt her curse being suppressed. If it were not for Maximus' status, she would have already grabbed the necklace without a thought. Here you are, Maximus readily gave her the necklace. Thank you, Your Majesty Maximus, Elysian thanked him with a smile as she quickly bound the necklace. Soon, she felt her curse being fully suppressed, giving her a few more years of time. Don't be too happy too early, there is also a downside to this necklace, Maximus reminded. Without much money, of course, there is a drawback to the necklace. What is it? Elysian became nervous all of a sudden. This necklace is only equivalent to a dam, once it overflows, you're finished. Thus, you need to slowly release it so you do not get overwhelmed. Where do I release it? Elysian understood and looked at him puzzlingly. Of course, to the source, Maximus smiled. To that bastard? Elysian unconsciously muttered. Ahem, how to release it? Elysian quickly became embarrassed and changed the topic. You just need to regularly see Liam and the curse will slowly subside, Maximus said with a smile. That's it? Elysian heaved a sigh of relief, hearing how easily it was. What she doesn't know is that hidden within it is Maximus' evil plan. In the future, as Elysian slowly releases this curse of love, she will fall deeper and deeper into the depths of the abyss of love. Of course, it's also a good thing for Elysian, making it easier for her to control her god's authority. After all, Maximus would not do a bad thing to his future daughter-in-law. After talking a bit longer, Elysian and her believers left his manor. Now that Liam is not needed, of course, they left quickly. Moreover, Elysian decided to develop a little further in the arcane continent and accumulate money for her domain. A year later, in Maximus' manor, training chamber. The wedding ceremony of Nathan and Zio just ended a month ago. This time there was less commotion, the two only wanted family members to attend the wedding. There weren't any powerful beings that came to disrupt the wedding. Such a peaceful wedding. Maximus, as a father, couldn't help but sigh. If only all his sons were this low-key. First is Liam, there was a goddess on his trail and an awakening goddess waiting to erupt. Elysienne came to Liam from time to time to release the trace of the curse stored in her necklace. Although Liam was a little weirded out at first, as the months passed, he thought that Elysienne was just some fan. After all, their reputation within the Institute is not low. With their father and their talent, they were quite famous as rising prodigies. As for Amara, she was still absorbing the origin mana pool. Maximus estimated that it would still take Amara over 5 years before she regained her talent. As for his other son, Max, he didn't know what was going on with that reckless kid. He went on adventures with his little lover Ella. The two little battle maniacs didn't want to fight in the virtual world but instead dived into the real world. If it were not for the many life-saving items of the two, they would have probably died countless times. As for Neo, his worry-free son, he was probably the most peaceful among the siblings besides Nathan. Aside from being a little lazy, if there was nothing else bothering him, he would not leave the room. If not for the little girl who keeps coming to his house to disrupt Neo's peaceful life from time to time, Neo would probably stay in his room all day long. As for school, Neo smash it all so he can skip classes. Besides the required activities and tasks, Neo can skip all the classes he wants. The most troublesome son of his is the youngest, Lux. This little money-grabbing son of his will offend anyone just for some money. By now, Lux almost occupied the market within the Silverleaf domain, earning him a few quadrillions a year. This almost caught up with his monthly earnings from the Myriad World Mall. However, the cost of all of this is becoming the enemy of almost all the top firms in the Silverleaf domain. After all, the market that Lux grabbed is equivalent to them earning less money. Fortunately, Maximus warned Lux to not offend a Tier 9 force at all costs. If that happens, Maximus would have a massive headache. However, despite all of these cons, it made him sigh a little bit. After all, his son is beginning to catch up with his wealth. Fortunately, the money he earned from the sales of rare spiritual plants is about 100 quadrillion. Moreover, after about 5 years, he will completely study Tier 7 knowledge skills, techniques, spells, cultivation manuals, etc. By then, his earnings would surely skyrocket. If it were not for him using his system points to strengthen his soul will, he would probably complete this a few years earlier. As for the girls, they were still his cute angels. Coming and going from studying, they barely cause trouble. The only headache is the pigs that come close to them from time to time. Maximus strictly prohibited them from going out with these pigs so as not to be sullied. Of course, if they insisted, the pig must undergo his butchering before proceeding. The girls didn't react much to this. Unless they found someone more amazing than their father, it would not interest them. But how could there be a man more amazing than their father? After reminiscing and finishing his daily routine, he came outside his training chamber. Going to Sky, they started to fight as usual. With air-popping sounds, Sky's fists and kicks resounded in the room. This time they were fighting without spells and special skills. As Maximus continued to glide in the room, Sky's fists and kicks hit nothing but air. The excited expression on Sky's face began to frown. After almost an hour without hitting anything, Sky stopped. "What are you doing? You don't plan to fight me?" Sky asked angrily. After all, she looked like a fool fighting with her shadow. "Aren't I fighting you now? You just can't hit me," Maximus teased. After a few years of fighting, combat almost became an instinct to him. He can even think of other things while he lets his body move freely. Such a perverted fighting skill almost made Sky give up. If it were not for her will being tempered a few lifetimes, she would probably have given up a long time ago. "Then fight another round. This time you are only allowed to use half of my strength and speed," Sky suggested. "All right." Chapter 217 Friends Reunion. 3 months later, in the city of Arcana at Soul Kitchen. Maximus was in a top restaurant, gathering with his friends. "Maximus, when will you go back to fight in Ancient Battlefield?" Ragnar asked. "I don't know, there's still a lot of origin energy left for me to spare." "I will not fight again before I finish it," Maximus answered. He was already a platinum rank in the Ancient Battlefield, equivalent to Tier 6. Bronze, copper, iron, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, legendary, battle god. Although he could forcibly defeat his opponent, it's too troublesome. After all, he was only Tier 5, showing off too much may have a degree of influence. The individuals fighting in the Ancient Battlefield are not ordinary people. Just to reach platinum rank, you need to be somewhat invincible in the 6th tier. "Pity, I don't have you as an opponent," Ragnar sighed. "Don't worry, just a few million more battles and I will also reach platinum rank," Griffin chimed in. Helmsworth Griffin was the first friend he made upon coming to the Arcane Continent. By now, even their families on the Cursed Continent were in alliance. The Helmsworth Empire didn't have much ambition, thinking only to continue their bloodline. So in the fight for the supreme throne of the Cursed Continent, they continued to be neutral. "Then I will wait for you," Ragnar said with fighting intent. The two of them became best friends through Maximus. A battle maniac to a battle maniac, they had a lot of topics to talk about. "Hey, you should quickly train yourself dutifully instead of fighting," Sith advised. A few years ago, when the blueprint of the ship was finished, Sith came back to his daily routine of studying knowledge and training. However, even now, the 4 people in the booth, including Maximus, were still 5th tier. It's not that their progress is slow, but because the cultivation manual they had contains almost all the elements in the world. Even Griffin, joining his guild, got a complete cultivation manual for free. "By the way, where's Lilith?" "It's already late," Ragnar complained. They gathered today to meet Lilith, who had just finished her devil training. However, the food was already being served, but she was still not here. "She should be here in a few minutes," Maximus replied. Just now, Lilith notified him that she would be late by a few minutes. Oh. As the clock ticked by, Lilith finally arrived. "You're here?" Maximus greeted as his eyes lit up. The demeanor of Lilith changed a little. Besides the innocence, there was also a little bit of a fierce aura. It seemed that the devil training she did worked a lot. "Hello," Lilith said shyly. "Come sit here," Maximus offered with a smile. "Okay." Lilith obeyed like a good wife. "Here, eat this while it's still hot." "Oh? Is it delicious?" Maximus asked, looking into her eyes. "Delicious?" Lilith nodded as she blushed. "You should also try this, it's a specialty of the Soul Kitchen." Maximus grabbed a spoonful of food and fed Lilith. "Oh," Lilith nodded as she unconsciously opened her mouth. The interaction between Maximus and Lilith left the people in the booth dumbfounded. "When did the relationship between the two of you become so good?" Ragnar couldn't help but ask. "Hasn't our relationship always been good?" Lilith looked puzzled. "You're hopeless." Ragnar didn't ask further, as he was signaled by Maximus. "Let's eat first." Maximus quickly changed the topic. After eating, they toured around the city, visiting all the entertainment facilities. Playing, shopping, and eating, Maximus and Lilith's relationship unknowingly became closer. Until dawn, they held hands as if it were normal. As for the 3 light bulbs, after eating, they were too embarrassed to be a third wheel and left after some time. "Where are you going now? Are you going to continue your training?" Maximus asked as he looked into her eyes. My sister only allowed me a few days of rest," Lilith answered pitifully. "Can't you ask for a few months of rest?" Maximus frowned. "No, my sister is quite strict. If it were not for her insistence, her sister might not even let her rest." "Hey, then we can only make your vacation worth it." Maximus comforted with a smile. Within a few days, he took Lilith to tour all around the city, even halting his training. His wives even got a little jealous and joined midway. As for Sky, she also took a break from training and joined them. The scene of Maximus taking beauties around the city soon became a sensation. Although there are many beauties comparable to his wives, their demeanor completely defeats others by a landslide, with only a few being comparable. After all, being nourished by various treasures in his system, how can they be comparable to others? 3 years later, in the training chamber. "Huh?" Finally filled in the soul will, Maximus muttered. Looking at his panel, he couldn't help but smile. Maximus Shadowcrest. Tier 5, 2.96%. Mana compatibility, rank 9-dimensional source. Soul amplitude, 10 million. Soul will, 10 million. Feeling that his thoughts were clearer, he felt that trillions of system points didn't go in vain. Now he can concentrate on mastering Tier 7 knowledge and earn money before improving his affinity. During these years, everything proceeded as normal. His empire was still dealing with the sea beast tide while fortifying the place. It seemed that sea beasts could be generated with only mana, as they never end. Fortunately, under the tireless effort of his guild members, everything is still peaceful. However, the other empires were not having a good time. The prolonged sea beast tide began to wear down the army, as their amalgamation of will began to decline. As for the various kingdoms, they were either incorporated by other empires or disappeared from the map. Speaking of his guild, due to his unremitting efforts, the members of the guild were about to reach 100 million. Although it's incomparable to other guilds in the same rank, it was already worth celebrating. With about 100 million guild members, the progress of the Tier 9 ship that they were creating was about to be completed. Maximus estimated that it would only take about 10 to 15 years before it's finished. One had to know that this is a Tier 9 ship vessel. Usually, it would take thousands of years just to create a prototype. However, with unremitting efforts and unlimited investments, it was shortened by just a few decades. Maximus calculated that his investment already reached quintillions of magic crystals. Fortunately, there is no one doubting about his source of wealth until now. Most of this is thanks to his core student status and the uncaring attitude of the apex sovereigns. After all, a few quintillions were just peanuts for them. Owning a whole domain, their wealth can't be counted using magic crystals. As for his family, they were progressing at a lightning speed. His wives had reached Tier 5 and his children had reached Tier 4. The credit for this is that their talent was upgraded from rank 5 mythic to rank 6 divine. Upgrading talent is not as fast as regaining it, even with top-notch resources. Even Amara, who was using the origin mana pool to regain her talent, was still stuck at rank 8. Amara still needed a few years before she could fully regain her talent. Unfortunately, his stupid son, Liam, still didn't seize the opportunity and was still flirting with Amara, taking it slow. Unlike his stupid son, Nathan seized the opportunity he got. By now, Zoe was already a few months pregnant. There was no hesitation at all. If it were not for their high tier, Zoe must have already had a child by now. Within a few years, he could finally have grandchildren. As for why it would take a few years of pregnancy, it's because they use a technique to increase their child's potential. Instead of the child inheriting just their parents' potential, it can go above it to produce a prodigy. Maximus also invested all out in this, not sparing a bit of money. Even Lux was a little jealous of the amount of money invested. As for his other wives, Emma and Jane, there was still no movement until now. It seems that it's really getting harder and harder to conceive a child. Even with all kinds of treasures he found on the Myriad World Mall, nothing is of use. Maximus can only do his best and pray for a little luck. During these 3 years, the progress of the Ethereum Pavilion also came to a bottleneck. Before spreading to other domains, Lux hoped to enhance the strength of his subordinates. After all, compared to other domains, the Silverleaf domain has only existed for a few thousand years. What they will face next is more cruel predators that will devour their blood regardless. However, with tens of millions of members on full-out training, even Lux's income of a few quadrillion a year is not enough. Lux can only continue to borrow money from his cheap father. Thinking of his cheap son, Lux, Maximus couldn't help but sigh. Such an ambitious son, he couldn't help but hurry and create another child. Maximus would like to see what heaven-defying genius he will produce. Perhaps that child of his can suppress Lux to the ground. Thinking of the funny scene, he noticed his wives had come home. Let's try today, see if I'm lucky. Chapter 218 Ultimate Mastery. A year later, Maximus sat in the training chamber with a wide smile painted on his face. Finally finished, he muttered. The Tier 7 chapter of Origin had just been completed. After nearly a decade of effort, he had finally finished this masterpiece. Reading a Tier 7 manual was different from thoughtlessly scanning a book, and the magnitude of knowledge between them was incomparable. If it were not for the billions of systems points he earned per day, he would need tens of thousands of epochs of continuous study just to be able to understand these knowledge. Just when he was about to celebrate such a milestone, something seemed to click in him as endless knowledge poured into his consciousness. It was different from the usual feeding of the system. It seemed that knowledge originally in his brain reorganized and became imprinted into his very being. It was being carved into his every cell and every piece of his soul. A dazzling light was also emitted which was quickly suppressed by the system and the room formation. Tintin, who was lying lazily in the token, also noticed what was happening to her host. Enlightenment? Tintin muttered. What a weird enlightenment. Is this the legendary super enlightenment? Tintin thought, sifting through her offline database. Enlightenment is not that rare. It happens when one's mastery of something reaches the transcendent level, giving you power beyond the skill. As for the legendary super enlightenment, it was vaguely recorded in her database. According to it, the strongest man in the Ethereum realm, Malgrin, experienced this phenomenon. What weirded out Tintin is that for Malgrin to achieve this legendary super enlightenment, he had gone through uncountable epochs of non-stop fighting. It is recorded that the world plunged into purgatory by then, as the whole Ethereum realm became a battlefield. From every apex sovereign, gods, beasts, mortals, grass, trees, fish, Malgrin spared nothing. He fought on equal terms with everyone, even when outnumbered. Fighting with mortals, he transformed into a mortal, suppressing his strength and will. Fighting with plants, he competes with nutrients and the sun until one of them withers. Transforming into an animal, he competed who hunted more prey. Plugging into the chaotic sea, he competed with world-destroying sea beasts on their territory. He never used his overwhelming power to trudge through all the challenges. Malgrin used every part of his skill and body to defeat everyone fair and square. After that, Malgrin was crowned the strongest being in the world. It is said that after Malgrin received the super enlightenment, the whole Ethereum realm seemed to be blessed, as every corner of it shone with light. What weirded out Tintin was that her host seemed to experience so-called super enlightenment while he did nothing of sorts. Moreover, no fancy things are happening, and even the aura is very converged. Furthermore, her host didn't even fight or study very much. Maximus only meditated for 3 hours a day and stayed motionless for an hour. Tintin couldn't wrap her head around what was happening. What Tintin didn't know is that Maximus was indeed experiencing the so-called super enlightenment. It's just that it was minimized by his system, and there was also a formation in the room. Although it only offered concealment despite being a very expensive Tier 9 array. When it came to concealment, it was second to none in the same realm. As for the previous enlightenment due to the mastery of Maximus of a skill to transcendence, it was mainly suppressed by the system. After a while, Maximus opened his eyes. Maximus breathed heavily as he felt the changes in his body. Is Origin running automatically? Maximus thought in puzzlement. Usually, even with his transcendence mastery, it would take some effort to run through his cultivation manual. But now it seemed that Origin had become a passive skill. Opening his system panel, he was shocked. Maximus Shadowcrest. Tier 5, 3.21%. Mana compatibility, rank 9-dimensional source. Soul amplitude, 10 million. Soul will, 10 million. Origin, Tier 7, ultimate. Ultimate? He thought that ultimate ranking was only used for treasures, resources, skills, and physiques. However, now even mastery has ultimate as a ranking. Curious, Maximus searched about what the ultimate mastery represented in the Myriad World Mall. What he found was a bunch of sporadic knowledge briefly mentioning what ultimate mastery was. Based on it, ultimate mastery is super rare. Although it's not as rare as an ultimate dimensional physique, very few achieve this feat. Reaching ultimate mastery in something is not as simple as going beyond that realm. Ultimate mastery means your skill will be etched the origin of all dimensions. Soon, people lucky enough to be blessed can inherit a physique inheriting part of that skill with the highest dimensional level physique. As for the benefit, he can have ultimate control of his skill. Just like now, Origin automatically becomes passive. More importantly, he can copy his skills and pass them to someone else. Initially, the ultimate dimensional level cultivation skill can only be used by one person. Now with ultimate mastery, it can be freely given to others. Of course, there is a limitation: the copied cultivation skill would be downgraded to dimensional level. Even then, it's a top dimensional level which is overpowered enough. One has to know that the cultivation manual he created for his family is only at the heaven level, the limit of this world. To reach the dimensional level, it needs to have more elements in conjunction. His origin is just very buggy, able to assimilate all the elements, that's why it reached the ultimate dimensional level. Deciding to pass the origin cultivation skill to his family, he couldn't help but have a headache. He is short on money right now that he can barely afford his training. After passing this cultivation skill to his family, his wallet may burst immediately. Suddenly, he remembered that he had already mastered all the skills, techniques, cultivation manuals, etc. He can already begin selling them. By then, his income would skyrocket, and a few more people using Origin would not be a problem. Before that, however, he carefully assessed his situation. 10 times the speed? Maximus couldn't help but mutter. 10 times the speed. At this rate, with passive training 24/7 plus 10 times the previous speed, he would reach Tier 6 in about 5 to 6 years. Compared to the hundreds of years of the previous estimate, such speed is breathtaking. That's ultimate mastery for you, Maximus thought happily. Tintin just watched from the side and rolled her eyes. Seeing her host's wide smile, she confirmed that it was indeed a super enlightenment. Thinking of this, she quickly cleansed her local data storage of the memory. So once she connected to the outside world, the main system would not find any details of it. Of course, it's not really deleted, it's just stored in another way which she can access anytime. This is the way her host told her. Tintin just wondered where her backup memory was stored. After Maximus calmed down, he quickly thought of his next plan. First, sell the Tier 7 knowledge and accumulate money. Second, pass the cultivation skill to his family. As for worrying that the cultivation skill would be spread, he was not worried. With his control over his cultivation skill, forceful stealing of the skill is useless. As for the third, just accumulate more until he reaches the Tier 8 realm. After that, Maximus would probably be comparable to Tier 9 Apex sovereigns. Of course, not all, those ancient Apex sovereigns that have existed from the beginning of time are not simple. Their control over their authority or law should reach 99.9999999. Just short of the world advancement. There is also Malgrin, whom he only heard from history, the strongest being in the world that can't be measured with common sense. Thinking of his next plan, he quickly instructed his system to begin printing Tier 7 knowledge. By now, his storage space, or should he call a storage dimension, already looks like a universe. There were 100 printers as big as the sun. In the core of this world was also a space filled with Tier 7 materials. To store Tier 7 and above knowledge, a simple printer and paper were not enough. It involved complex laws and high-tier materials. Anyway, the previous printer would definitely not work. Each of these gigantic Tier 7 printers cost him a quadrillion magic crystals each. Under his conscious savings, he managed to buy 100 of them. Seeing that it had already begun printing, he couldn't help but sigh. Inside his storage dimension, each identical copy of a book formed a planet. Orbiting it was a moon-sized printer, the Tier 6 universal hex printers. After the galaxies of books, there were millions and billions of light-years of God atom metal, earth of life, and water of life. After that, there were miscellaneous things that he and his family used for daily training. They also formed a galaxy under his manipulation. It might seem like he didn't use many resources, only ultimate treasures to condense his foundation and world origin energy. On the contrary, with origin as a cultivation skill, Maximus needed all kinds of treasures and resources as supplements for his training to progress. After all, the origin energy is just the driving force. To upgrade his realm, he needed more supplements. Chapter 2: 19-Dimensional Coins. A month later, in the training chamber. This stock should be adequate, Maximus thought. In the past month, he had been slowly accumulating and printing Tier 7 books. Selling them one by one was uneconomical. Selling them when there is a sufficient supply can not only promote his shop but also accumulate enough reputation. Now, there are about 3 to 5 copies of each Tier 7 book, he can finally begin selling them. Operating his system, he quickly listed all the available books in his shop. In the martial dimension in a top dojo. A bunch of students and apprentices sat anxiously as they waited for the Dimensional Origin Library to update its stock. A month ago, the usually non-responsive store posted a piece of notice: Tier 7 books will be available in Dimensional Origin Library. Besides it, was a month-long countdown. Even then, this piece of news sent ripples through all dimensions. The Dimensional Origin Library had already accumulated some reputation by mass-producing and selling high-tier knowledge with transcendent mastery insight. It was considered the holy grail of learning. Unfortunately, years passed by, and the knowledge in it was only low to mid-tier. Now, finally, it would begin selling Tier 7 knowledge. They were not merely excited for this tier of knowledge but for the meaning behind it. This signaled that in the future, the Dimensional Origin Library could continue to update, selling Tier 8, Tier 9, or even Tier 10 knowledge. The students eagerly waited. As the seconds ticked by, they warmed up their fingers so they could quickly buy what they wanted. After all, it was the first time Dimensional Origin Library would sell Tier 7 books, so there would surely be a shortage of it. With a ding, a pop-up with the Dimensional Origin Library notification updating their store product. With quick hands, the students searched for their follow-up cultivation manuals and quickly bought them regardless of the price. Before this, they had already borrowed money from the Dimensional Bank. The Dimensional Bank is a transdimensional platform similar to Myriad World Mall that lets you borrow and deposit money. Because Maximus kept the ethereal realm hidden, the transdimensional platform system he had is incomplete. Dimensional Bank is just one of them. There was also a specialized auction, dimensional travel, dimensional battle arena, dimensional mercenary, etc. It can be said that Myriad World Mall is the most primitive function of his transdimensional platform system that connects through almost all of dimensions.
I bought it.
Ha ha ha, I can finally advance to Tier 7. Damn, there were only 3 copies of my follow-up training manual, I didn't get one. Me too. I don't know whose fast-handed is, I didn't even see how many stocks are mine. A group couldn't help but curse, seeing they hadn't bought anything. Browsing for other books, they were also out of stock. Finally, under their search, they noticed that there were no longer any Tier 7 books in stock. In just a few seconds, the Tier 7 books Maximus had accumulated for a month were wiped out. Hee hee newbies, I bought a total of 3 books.
That's nothing, I bought 10. Fuck, what?
You bought 10?
How is that possible?
Hee hee, I have a Tier 10 system spirit to reserve one for me. Damn, rich kid. Get out of here before I lose control of my fist and punch you in the face. Heh, plebeians, bye-bye. The students who bought more books couldn't help but brag about their achievements. It seemed like buying a book was worthy of an amazing achievement. As for the system spirit, it's like an AI that can help you manage your transdimensional platform, like the Myriad World Mall, it can manage your shop and shop for you. Besides the situation in the martial dimension, other dimensions were not having a good time either. Although Maximus accumulated books for a month, it's not enough for them. Having bought nothing, despite excitedly waiting for a month, is heart-wrenching. And those who bought one bragged continuously, adding salt to their wounds. Meanwhile, in the Ethereum realm, Maximus was having the time of his life. After the Tier 7 books he had accumulated were sold, his smile couldn't stop. In this wave, he earned over 1 quintillion crystal coins. If it were not for the short supply, he would have earned more. Maximus's previous earnings were only 1 to 3 quadrillion every month. Now, in just a few seconds, he earned 1 quintillion. I'm rich! Maximus muttered excitedly. However, before he could continue to celebrate, the Myriad World Mall seemed to glitch as an update began. This had happened previously when the gold coins were replaced by crystal coins. Maximus guessed it was another change of currency. It should be because my money finally reached 1 quintillion, Maximus concluded. Previously, whenever he had money, he bought anything he wanted. That's why, despite having quadrillions of income per month, his balance couldn't reach 1 quintillion. Heck, his balance probably never reached half of it. After a few seconds, the update was finished. Myriad World Mall. Dimensional Origin Library. Dimensional Coins, 1,175,127. First, his shop was finally upgraded to a star. Having a star meant it was somewhat recognized by all dimensions. Although in the past, the Dimensional Origin Library was already quite famous, the precipitation was still a little short. Now, earning 1 quintillion crystal coins in just a few seconds seemed to trigger the star ranking criteria. As for the benefits of stars, aside from better promotion and convenience, it did nothing. In the primitive state of his transdimensional platform system, with only buying and selling services, there was nothing more he could ask. Unless he exposed the Ethereum realm coordinates and distributed the Myriad World Mall system all over the world, his transdimensional platform system would remain as it is. However, if he did that, the fact that he owned Dimensional Origin Library would be exposed. There was already quite buzz, guessing his identity, to be able to provide a bunch of high-tier knowledge with Transcendence Mastery and Sight. Some guessed that he had a connection to the top 3 dimensional organizations. The super-rich transdimensional platform, the elusive Timespace Bureau, or the All-Dimensional Council. After all, mass-producing Transcendent Mastery Insight can only be made possible with Tier 12 treasure or at the same tier. This also reminded Maximus that his system is a remnant of a Tier 12 treasure. It is because it was a failed product that it was downgraded to Tier 11. Even then, it still contains some capabilities of a Tier 12 treasure. As for what Tier 12 represents? It was the strongest realm possible in all of the dimensions. It's so powerful that even with all the dimensions combined there were less than 10 Tier 12 figures. Fortunately, he had already thought of the solution to this problem. It would not expose his connection with the Dimensional Origin Library, while still spreading the Myriad World Mall and exposing the Ethereum realm coordinates. After reaching Tier 8 and having the Curse Continent in his pocket, the amalgamation of will he would receive when converted to system points would probably reach hundreds of billions and possibly trillions of system points. Using it, he could quickly master the intricacies of Myriad World Mall and even his system. By then, a bit of micromanipulation should not be a problem. Even if it could not work, using the omnipotence of the amalgamation of will, after he mastered it, there should be no follow-up problem. As for dimensional coins, 1,000,000 times different? Maximus counted. If crystal coins are worth 1, then dimensional coins are worth 1,000,000. Now it's a little better, Maximus thought after looking at his balance. With a bunch of zeros earlier, although it made him excited, it also had a sense of unrealness. Seeing a bunch of zeros earlier, Maximus even thought that there was a glitch. I wonder if there is a higher currency than this? Maximus thought. Not dwelling on it any longer, he used all his current balance to buy more Tier 7 printers and materials. 100 are simply not enough for the current shop. Adding 1,000 more Tier 7 printers means 10 times more money. After finishing the operation and seeing that the printer was already working, he sighed in relief. Now the money-making machine is upgraded, it's time to advance my realm, Maximus thought. He is still not satisfied with his speed of becoming Tier 6 in 5 to 6 years. Since he can still hasten his progress, why not do it? Using his system points, he can begin upgrading his affinities to Tier 9. As for learning knowledge to create Tier 8 chapters of Origin, he will put it aside for now. Coming out of his training chamber, instead of the usual scenery, he was greeted by his wife, Emma. What happened? Maximus asked worriedly. There is no problem, it's good news, Emma smiled.
Ha, good news?
Maximus muttered in puzzlement. Looking closely at Emma, he felt a slight pulse in her belly. You're pregnant? Maximus asked excitedly. It seems that husband's senses are still keen, Emma nodded happily. After feeling that something was different from her, she quickly did a personal checkup. Feeling the new life being born inside of her, she couldn't contain her excitement and quickly wanted to share the news with her husband. Hey, you've worked hard, Maximus muttered as he gave her a gentle hug. It's not hard, bearing the fruit of our love is as it should be, Emma smiled. Then I can't do anything but show my love to you. Maximus intently looked into her eyes. Husband. Chapter 220 Imparting Cultivation Skill. 3 months later. Maximus looked happily at his balance after selling this month's Tier 7 book quota. Selling them individually was impractical. Having a monthly sale is equivalent to hunger marketing, driving popularity and compulsive spending for his shop. Now, seeing his balance, it seems that his marketing is effective. Myriad World Mall. Dimensional Origin Library? Dimensional coins, 10,101 trillion. In 3 months, his money multiplied over 10,000-fold. Now in the system space dimension, there were already over 100,000 sun-sized Tier 7 printers. In the previous months, he invested all his money to buy printers. Moreover, it seems that the 1-star rating shop advertisement worked its magic. Until now, no matter the quantity, all the Tier 7 books are still being sold out. It seems that with a 1-star rating, Dimensional Origin Library attracted huge traffic. In the past, this phenomenon usually lasted for a few weeks or a month. Now, 3 months have passed and the frenzy still hasn't subsided. After all, even if his store was super famous in the past, compared to the size of all dimensions, it's nothing. Now there was a star rating, which proves that Dimensional Origin Library is somewhat reputable and has something unique to offer. Maximus can only say that people only look into brands, not into their essence. However, he really can't blame them, as even he only bought products from 5-star stores. As for lower stars, he was too lazy to look into them, much less the starless ones. After all, to reach 5 stars, the trial and tribulation that it went through made it an all-time honored brand. Even if it's a little expensive, you are guaranteed to be satisfied with the purchased item. Now I can start enhancing my Tier 5 foundation. He only needed about 30 trillion dimensional coins to buy all the ultimate treasures. With 10,000 trillion of them, it can be said that Maximus only spent some change coins. Having the Tier 5 ultimate treasure of the corresponding elements. He also bought another set of ultimate treasures from Tier 1 to 3. This other set is for his family. After he imparted them his cultivation skill, they also needed these ultimate treasures to enhance their realm foundation. Although ultimate treasures are not needed to advance, without it, Origin is somewhat incomplete. As for buying only Tier 1 to 3 ultimate treasure? It's because after changing to Origin, his family cultivation would surely regress to either Tier 2 or 3. Without unlimited mana like him, this is inevitable. Fortunately, with his support and a bit of diligence, they can probably be back in their realm after a few years. After he was done, he took out the Tier 5 ultimate treasure one by one and swallowed it with his mana. With his passive cultivation skill, Origin would slowly absorb these ultimate treasures without his deliberate manipulation. Done. Maximus smiled, feeling that the ultimate treasure was slowly getting absorbed. Having a passive cultivation skill is really great, he thought. At night, after dinner, he called his wives, children, Zio, Amara, and even Sky to his private training chamber.
What's going on, Dad?
Liam asked doubtfully. Probably urging you to have children quickly, Max teased. After their mother, Emma, became pregnant a month ago. The two lovebirds, Liam and Amara, were bombarded with urging to quickly have children. Fortunately, the two were hard-headed and did not compromise. Think about your problem first, Liam refuted, looking at him meaningfully.
Oh, Max, quickly shut up.
Max still had a headache and could still not defeat Ella. Now, without fulfilling his promise, the relationship between the two was still ambiguous. The others didn't mind the chatter between the two as they looked at Maximus curiously.
Ahem, I'm here to impart a powerful cultivation manual to you, Maximus started. Cultivation manual?
Sky looked doubtful. As for the others, they were not so surprised. After all, Maximus had already given them a heaven-level manual up to the Tier 6 chapter. They thought Maximus was here to give them the follow-up chapter. You will understand after reading it, Maximus didn't say much as he began to manipulate his cultivation skill and impart it to them. Soon, a silence ensued as they eagerly absorbed the knowledge. The vast difference between a heaven-level manual and the ultimate dimensional level manual was too great, taking them a few hours just to absorb it. Opening their eyes, they looked blankly at Maximus. They couldn't describe their feelings right now. They were shocked, happy, puzzled, and a little worried. Giving them a few minutes to calm down, Maximus began to explain what he had just done. He told them about ultimate mastery and whatnot, explaining where the origin came from. You really created this? Sky looked at him, not believing a thing. Sky had been reincarnated to a few high-tier dimensions in the past. However, the highest cultivation manual she got her hands on was at the dimensional level. Sky didn't even know that there is an ultimate level for cultivation manuals. Meanwhile, his wives and children, although shocked, believed everything Maximus had said. For them, their father and husband were omnipotent. If Maximus told them that he became an apex sovereign overnight, they would believe it without blinking an eye. As for the two daughters-in-law, although they were shocked, they stayed silent. This is indeed my creation, anyway, you will know more about it in the future. Maximus didn't explain much. Giving them his cultivation skills would not only make them stronger, but they would also become immortal. After practicing origin, they would be bound to him. This binding is deeper than the binding of the system. Even if their soul and body disintegrate, their very origin remains with him. With enough strength and capabilities, he can revive them at any time. As for the corresponding consequences of giving them an ultimate dimensional cultivation skill, Maximus didn't worry much. Besides his confidence in controlling the cultivation skill, he is also confident in his strength and the speed of progression. Maximus estimated that it would only take him a few hundred to 1,000 years to reach Tier 8. By then, any problem would not be a problem. Of course, for now, he still needed to warn them. After stating all the precautions, the people in the room remained in a daze, digesting what had happened. All right, just stay here and study origin for a while. If you have any questions, you can ask me anytime. Soon, with his instructions, they sat cross-legged as they ran origin. Soon the surrounding mana began to agitate and rapidly surround them. It seemed that their body was too thirsty as mana poured to the like tide. Fortunately, Maximus came prepared, and there was a sufficient mana around. Embedded in the room is a magic crystal core, the origin of the magic crystal. It's a higher than top-grade magic crystals that contain a trace of law. Magic crystal core could simply not be produced by the Ethereum realm and can only be produced by Tier 10 dimensions and above. Each one of them cost him 100 trillion dimensional coins. As the mana began to agitate and be absorbed by them, instead of advancing, their cultivation began to regress. The children regressed from Tier 4 to Tier 2. His wives regressed from Tier 5 to Tier 3. As for Sky, she only regressed by a tier, from Tier 6 to Tier 5. After a few days of consolidation, they partially digested his cultivation skill. Now absorb these treasures quickly, don't leave this room with them. Maximus quickly gave the ultimate treasure without much nonsense. The people in the room were already numb to what Maximus was giving them, so they just nodded. Although they didn't know why they needed to absorb these treasures before leaving the room, they still obeyed regardless. Ultimate treasures are so rare that even an apex sovereign may not have them. Maximus was worried that the unfeeling apex sovereign at the top would covet them and cause problems for him. His training chamber could isolate everything, so he advised them to finish their business here. Soon time passes like a wind. After a few weeks, the children finished absorbing the treasure. After over a month, his wives also finished absorbing the treasure. As for Sky, it took her over 3 months to absorb the treasures. They were not like him. When he absorbed treasure, it only took a few seconds to a few minutes. After all, besides his ultimate mastery of his cultivation skill, he also had unlimited mana. A month later, after Sky finished absorbing the ultimate treasures. In Liam and Amara's manor. In the quaint room, Amara was absorbing the Origin mana pool faster and faster, leaving only a few liters of it. Origin seemed to hasten the progress at which she could absorb the Origin mana pool. A few hours later, with a clicking sound, Amara's potential broke through the 9th rank. Subsequently, her heaven-level physique, Eternal Druid's body, was also awakened. Before Amara could celebrate and share the news with her husband, a rush of memories flooded her mind. The Nexus continent. Her past. The impending Abyss attack. The Great Battle. Sacrifice. It took Amara a few hours to roughly sort her memories. I didn't expect that I would be arched by a pig of this generation. Amara smiled wryly.